and sorry, to be to do psychology and social behavior. And through that, I was just kind of exploring the different fields where you could go with a psychology degree. And I initially found school psychology by looking up like best jobs, with these types of degrees that had really good employment outlooks, where I got to be really hands-on. I didn't want to be in an office away from clients all day. So I ended up finding this job just through kind of doing research about how I could be working daily with children. I knew I wanted to do something, with child development and child advocacy. So it seemed like the best fit for me.
I have an offshoot question for you. What's your undergrad degree in, Danny?
So it's psychology and social behavior through UCI. And then obviously grad school was a school psychology specific program.
Awesome. Okay. All right. Next question. Let me get to my chat real quick. So the next question is, how many students do you work with on a typical day? And this is from my student Tatum.
So that can really shift from day to day. One of the things I do love most about being a school psychologist is every day is really different. There will be days where I'm in classrooms all day supporting behaviors and emotional situations or escalations if teachers are calling me and asking for support. Other days I might have, like, Mondays are my counseling schedule, so I have back-to-back therapy most of the day on Mondays. Other days I'm in my office most of the day just working on a report or doing some assessment. So it's really different from day to day. I carry a counseling caseload here of about 12 to 13 students right now. And then I see all the students that I'm assessing or that I kind of support behaviorally ongoing. And then of course there's always crises or other things that come up. And so sometimes I'm spending my day responding to a risk assessment or a threat assessment or some other crisis.
We were just looking at kind of all the things that school psychs did, and it's very ironic. I've worked with school psychs for a long time, Danny, and I had no idea how much what you have to do on a daily basis. So hats off to you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, you definitely are juggling a lot of different things and wearing a lot of different hats. And it can differ based on the district you work. Some districts really push just assessments and report writing, and other districts allow for a lot of more varied roles.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. All right, next question is from let's see, here we go. Alexa, she said, how many hours do your interns roughly work per week? I think you said that earlier, but if you want to say it again for us.
Yeah, so a practicum student is usually about 16 hours. They'll have 2 8-hour days, and intern, it's usually like a full 40 hours a week.
Okay, so it is a job.
Yeah, if it's an internship, I think the requirements really require that you're on site 4 to 5 days a week to meet the hours that you need for your internship. So we try though not to have interns taking any work home. Like, interns work when they're here, at least in our district, and we're not asking them to take any of that extra with them.
Are these paid internships, Danny, or are they unpaid?
My district, sadly, is unpaid internships. We have been advocating for paid internships, and we're hoping that eventually we'll get there. Many of our surrounding districts, like LA Unified, I know is fully paid internship. So a lot of districts will pay anywhere, I think, between like $10,000 and a full salary. If you need that, and LA Unified is a great place to get a fully paid internship. Hopefully someday we'll have something to offer other than just training.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big difference. 10 grand a year to a full salary, right? It's that's a big difference too.
It is, yeah.
And especially paid or unpaid completely. That would definitely motivate people differently, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Our next question is from Sitlali. She says, what are your personal strengths, Danny?
Oh, okay. My personal strengths.
Yeah.
Wow. I think mine is probably consultation. It's what I enjoy most. And I think when you enjoy the task, you're the best at it as well. I think as a school psychologist, often there's only one person per site, or sometimes you're at multiple sites. And so I find that consultation is a way to have the most impact in the least amount of time. So I can work with staff and teachers and develop their skills in certain areas, or parents, and that will carry on when I'm no longer in the room and no longer supporting the student. So I think because of that, I've invested the most time in it, and my strengths have developed in that area.
Awesome. All right, let's see. Our next question is from Brianna. She says, are there any struggles you have faced working in a school setting?
Yes. Limited resources is a huge one. There are, I think most school of my colleagues are, especially working in special education, feel like there's not enough time to do the job to the extent that they would want to, right? And so I think that's the biggest frustration, is just not always having the time to do the gold standard, to do the best practice, follow through the way that you want, and just having to always do the best you can with what you have and keep advocating so that you can continue to get the need. But that can be discouraging at times.
Yes, we were definitely talking about all the things you have to do as a school psych, and mental health being a big component of that. And what I talk a lot about in our class is those are the first things on the chopping block are education and mental health. So, it sucks, but it's some of those things, and that's some of the things that you have to deal with is budget cuts and all kinds of fun things that are out of your control most of the time. So,
and then, it's compliance often comes first. And so what happens is, you have to prioritize compliance and legal timelines. And then when you really want to be prioritizing mental health and intervention. And so it's kind of ethically, it's difficult and it's hard to find your way sometimes throughout all that.
Yeah, no, definitely. All right, next question. Let's see. What is your hardest part being a school psychologist? What is the most difficult part of your job, Danny?
The most difficult part, I think we're kind of discussing it, is just balancing the, work life, home life, being able to get the job done in the time given. My particular district is it's a very affluent district, and parents, a lot of our parents also, have advocates and attorneys and lawyers, which is great. We want our parents to have people that are explaining the system to us. So I think for me, though, it as a school psychologist in my district, you're also management. So you kind of manage your special education team. So I would say that one of the hardest parts of my job now is always working with my team to ensure compliance, that we're following all of the guidelines and IEPs as we need to be, that we're really prepared for some of these very legalistic conversations. I think I didn't experience that in other districts that I've worked. It's kind of unique to this specific area. So depending on where you get hired, it may be something you need to anticipate as well.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, each district is a little bit different. The requirements are different, all the different things, if you're going to be paid or unpaid. There's so many things to consider. So you're in Orange County, correct?
Yes, I'm in Orange County. Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Let's get our next question. All right, next question is from Litzy. I just did that one. Next one is from Ava Maria. She says, what is your weakness? Uh-oh.
No, it's great. It's great. I think I have been doing this for over 10 years now. And so I think staying up with the most recent research and best practices, things are always shifting. And some of the things that I was taught and learned in grad school already are somewhat irrelevant. Or we've kind of started to look back and think like, wow, that's maybe that's not like honoring neurodiversity. And that's, so it's just kind of making sure that you're really following through with that research and constantly considering whether what you learned is still applicable, if it's still right, if it's still like the most ethical way to, move forward. I learned so much from my practicum students and my interns because they're always bringing in the most recent best practices, and I can be constantly evolving in my own work. So just making sure to make time to continue to follow the research and make the best choices.
And you said something that's like a buzzword now for sure in my line of work as well. You said neurodiversity. And so can you explain to my students what neurodiversity is?
Yeah, I think it's just a huge culture shift in the field too, and how we're looking at disabilities, as that we all are variations of typical, right, and normal, and we need to really value that neurodiversity. All of our brains work differently. We all bring something different to the table and have something different to offer. And like my site specifically, we have an autism program, and so for a long time we've been doing autism acceptance at our school, and now that's really shifted to it was autism awareness. And now then it shifted to autism right? It's not just about being aware, it's about accepting, it's integrating, it's welcoming. And now it's kind of turned large into this like full neurodiversity, where we're just trying to really honor those differences and kind of present something different. I think a lot of times, especially when we're working with students with autism, a lot of the approach has been to teach neurodivergent individuals to be neurotypical. And now we're kind of trying to teach our students also to understand that there are neurodivergent individuals that might communicate differently, and these are differences, and they're not challenges or problems, and that it's also our responsibility as neurotypicals to adjust our behavior so we can connect with neurodivergent students and families.
Absolutely. And I just shared with them, which you probably use too, Danny, about teaching tolerance. I don't know if you've used it. I'm sure you have in your line of work. But that's a big thing. I'm actually going to make an assignment for them that's, researching what teaching tolerance is. And it's a lot of this. We're talking a lot about neurodiversity, talking about differences, because there's all kinds of differences. It's not necessarily just race or religion anymore. It's a lot of other layers to being a human these days, right? So
absolutely.
Thank you for sharing that too. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right, next question. All right, what can I do as an undergraduate student to become a strong candidate in the field of school psych?
That's a great question. I think as much hands-on experience as you can possibly get. So any opportunities to work in the field, whether that's through volunteer work, through working as like an instructional assistant for students, to just being on school sites. I know when we're looking at applicants, not necessarily for grad school, but for internships, we're really looking at those people that, have done work and know that that's where they want to be. So I think, when you see that on an application and that person has already kind of gone to the front lines and has worked with students and feels comfortable, I think it definitely increases the strength of the application.
It gives you that edge. Yeah. Awesome. I tell them that as well. We have an internship program through our major where you have to get linked up with a specific site. And it's part of your coursework. It's an option. I think it should be mandatory. I'm a little biased, but I think it should be mandatory for working in the field. Because how do you know? How do you know if you've never done this work before? How do you know you're good at it? How do you know that this is for you? You kind of don't. And especially if you're going to grad school and spending all this money and all this time and effort into it, you kind of want to know that this is something that you're really interested in.
Yeah. And on that line, like shadowing a school psychologist, if you have an opportunity to shadow a school psychologist and really see what a day can look like before you take that leap, I think that's also super helpful.
So segue question to you, Danny, if my students had further questions or if they wanted, and I'm going to ask you a couple more, I know you have to be mindful of your time. She has an assessment in like 10 minutes, guys, so just letting you know. Would you be available via email if they had further questions down the line, or even just further connection? Because I think what's difficult for a lot of students is they don't know anybody in the field because they're not in it yet, right? So if they have, and that's what's cool about this course, is when we have different speakers and different folks coming in, just to bounce questions off of our ideas or things like that. Are you open to that?
Absolutely. Yes. I can put my email in the chat before I leave, or I know, Nikki, you have my email and you can feel free to share it with your class. And yeah, I actually get like 3 or 4 random emails every year, I think, from students, like undergrad or grad students that want to interview me as part of a project or just have questions. And so I'm absolutely a resource. And sometimes just going on like your local district's page and finding the emails for school psychologists and just reaching out and until someone responds to you is another great strategy or tool.
Yeah, I would get as well in my profession a lot. When I was working at the help group, people wanted to interview me quite a bit to say, how did you get in this role? Especially because I was I'm a licensed marriage family therapist doing more of an administrative role. So they were like, what? How does that work? So, but I would answer a lot of questions for students that way as well. So thank you, Danny. I appreciate you being open to that if they have further questions down the line. So
absolutely.
All right, now we have a couple or more questions. I think like 2 more, and then we'll cut you loose. So
no
the
problem.
first one is from Natalie. She said, "Do you ever work with parents? If so, what advice do you give for working with parents, and what makes it difficult?" Or whoops, and sorry, I'm reading it. And who makes it difficult to work with that student? Is that what you're trying to say? This is Natalie. that what you're trying to say? That's, can you ask me the question and then I'll ask it to her?
Yeah, like if she works with parents, what advice would you give her parents to make it difficult to work with the kids?
Ah, okay. So if there's difficult parents, right? How, or do you work with families? And how do you work with those difficult families? I think is what we're asking.
Yeah, so I work a ton with families. I have so many partnerships with our students' families. We work really closely with them, particularly in this district. And it's so important. I feel so much more impactful when I have those collaborative relationships, but there are challenges at times, particularly when my perspective or the parents' perspective or the district's, hopes for the child really differ from the families. And we have really intense disagreements sometimes that are difficult to navigate. I think I have found that, you can really honoring the parent and their expertise as the person that knows their child best. Really making sure to do a lot of active listening, even if you're not agreeing, they need to feel heard and understood, and using a lot of immediacy. So sometimes things do get difficult and tense, and I think it's okay to acknowledge that in the moment. Like we have IEP meetings where it's getting too intense and we recess, we say this is intense. We all have really strong feelings about this. We focus on those common goals, but our goals are the same, and that we want this child to thrive and be successful. And so I think we need to take 15 minutes. We need to come back and kind of reconvene. So I think just being willing to acknowledge that the conversation is difficult and that emotions are running high, focusing on those shared goals and how you can get there, and just making sure to value that parent. But ultimately, you do have to stick to your expertise and recommendation as a practitioner, even when a parent disagrees. You can always work to compromise and collaborate within what you find to be reasonable and ethical. But sometimes you do get to a standstill where, what the parent thinks is best for the child, you can't get on board with. And those situations are difficult to navigate.
Yeah, oh, definitely. Thank you. Hang on one sec.
Yeah.
Switching things up real quick. All right, let's see. I have 2 more questions and then I think that's going to be it for today. And I, again,
Perfect.
appreciate your time, Danny.
Oh, yeah.
So Tatum asked, what is the most rewarding part of your job?
There's a lot of pieces. I definitely think it's through consultation, seeing that long-term impact. I think when behavior is kind of my joy of this job, working with teachers and families and students so that children can access and be more successful in the school environment, and really seeing those impacts, seeing a child who is struggling, whether it's like self-regulation or frustration tolerance, or, getting rewarded through their hard work. I think just sometimes, you don't see those immediate rewards, but when you get to stay at the same site for years and you remember this kinder that came in, punching kids and rolling on the ground and crying every day, is now like getting honored at assemblies for just being like a great citizen at the school. Like, I think, kind of those long goals and seeing it all come to fruition through that hard work is definitely what keeps me going in the career.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, last question. This is, it's a good question. I like this one. This is from Jose. He says, who is your role model and how difficult was it to, this is 2 parts. So first question, who is your role model? Let's go with that first.
Who is my role model? Oh my gosh, that one's really tricky. I think within the field, my role model would be Kathy Minke. She was a professor for me in graduate school, also was the president of the National Association of School Psychologists, and now maybe the CEO or some important role. I don't know where she's continued to climb that ladder, but she just really taught me strong ethics. And I think that's something that is so important day to day in this field. She just had such a strong core that was unwavering when it came to doing the right thing for children. And so I often have her voice in my head when I'm moving through things. What would she do? What would she say? Like, how can I honor this individual and their family through this difficult moment? And so I think it is important to latch on to someone like that when you find him, because you're going to need him when you face challenging, ethical dilemmas in this field.
Yeah. Could you do me a favor, Danny? Could you just put her name in?
Oh, yeah.
So I can also give that to my students too, as just another person, another kind of resource, another person, that's in the field too. Cool. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Appreciate it. All right. And then Jose's last portion is very different question, is how difficult was it for you during COVID to keep in contact with your students?
Oof, it was extremely challenging. When we first closed from March to June, we went virtual and we're all figuring it out very quickly. Even getting students to log on was a challenge. I was calling them on the phone. It just wasn't the same. Like counseling and therapy through a screen and over the phone has its challenges, especially initially when we weren't really good at it yet. We had no concept of how to do it well. And I think we were all a little uncomfortable on the screen. My school was open all last year. We never closed. And so I have been able to access my students probably more than some others during the pandemic as our district stayed open. But still, we were doing counseling 6 feet away with a partition between us and masks. And, there's not that same level of intimacy. So I think this is our first year where we're all in masks still, but we're not social distancing. So I'm able to sit at a table with a student, have shared materials, not be spraying or temp taking every time they walk in the room. And so I think I've been able to have like more productive sessions since then. It was definitely a challenge. I think we've done the best we could with what we were given, but I continue to look forward to things getting more and more back to normal. For some of our students, we're teaching things that are so difficult to teach with a mask, emotional identification and recognizing emotions in others and yourself. And that's tough when you're in a mask and far away.
Yeah, and they can't see. They only see our eyes. And yes, we communicate with our eyes, but there's so much more about your face. Like I haven't seen half of my students' face because I can't, because we're in our class. I'm like, I have no idea what they really look like. I'm like, I was working with this guy the other day and he had a full-on beard and I had no idea. I haven't seen him without his mask on. And I was like, oh, that's what you look like, right? Like it was very strange. And he was on Zoom. And that's only
this year is the first year that our kids, since the pandemic, our kids can take off their masks outside. And so I've been taking some of my sessions out there because I want to be able to see their face and for them to see my face and know that I'm smiling at them and encouraging them. I feel like we all probably like try and use our eyes so much now in communication that it's gonna like look funny when we all have our masks off, like how wide our eyes are.
Yeah, they're gonna be huge, right? We're gonna have this big affect with our eyes and forget about everything else, right?
Yeah.
So. All right, cool. Well, thank you, Danny. I know you need to run. I forgot to tell you I was recording this. I'm so sorry. I should have said that before. I think you got a
notified me. No worries.
So I'm sorry about that. I should have told you ahead of time. But I'm recording this so that the students can refer back to this because it's a lot, obviously, and there may have been something that they missed. We're also still dealing with COVID, unfortunately. So there's people in and out. So but I do want to thank you for coming in today. I think this is really helpful for our students to hear from the horse's mouth. And what I'll do is share your email in our Canvas. We use Canvas online in case anybody has further questions or follow-up. So.
Perfect, Nikki. Well, thank you everyone for having me and for your great questions.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Danny. Have a good day. Okay.
You too. Bye.
Bye. All right, you guys.